Welcome to The Explainer, where we take complex topics and break them down, using the source material to tell the story.
You know, when you think about World War II in Europe, there's probably one day that just springs to mind, right? June 6th, 1944, a day that really, truly changed everything.
Take a look at this number. That's how many Allied soldiers hit the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that. It's an absolutely staggering number of people.
And they arrived in the largest seaborne invasion in the history of the world. We're talking about a massive, unbelievable show of force, all pointed at one goal: taking back Western Europe.
But here's the thing. Was this one epic invasion the whole story? Not even close. Today, we're going to zoom way out. Because that massive landing on the beaches, it was only possible because of other, totally different wars being fought at the exact same time. We're talking secret wars, wars in the sky, all of them just as crucial. Let's get the full picture.
Okay, so Section 1, the largest invasion. Let's start with the one we all know, Operation Overlord. You kind of have to grasp the sheer scale of this thing to appreciate everything else that was happening behind the scenes.
See, it wasn't just one big landing. It was 5 of them, all happening at once along a 50-mile stretch of coastline. You had Utah and Omaha for the Americans, Gold and Sword for the Brits, and Juneau for the Canadians. It was a massive, coordinated international push from the get-go.
So what was the problem? Well, the problem was that they were trying to invade what was basically the most heavily fortified coastline in the world. The Germans had built this thing called the Atlantic Wall. Just a nightmare of fortifications, mines, and obstacles, all designed to stop an invasion dead in its tracks.
So how on earth do you get past that? Well, with one of the most incredible tricks in military history: Operation Bodyguard. The plan was simple but genius. Convince the Germans their real invasion was going to be somewhere else entirely. So what did they do? They literally created a fake army, a phantom army. They put the famous General George S. Patton in command of it and even used fake radio traffic to sell the whole lie. It was a giant, elaborate hoax.
Okay, so that's the deception front, but that leads us right into our next section, the secret war. Because while all this was happening out in the open, there was a whole other war being fought in the shadows.
All across Europe, you had these secret groups. Think Britain's SOE, America's OSS, and all the local resistance fighters, like the French Maquis or the Polish Underground. These weren't soldiers in uniform. They were spies, saboteurs, regular people fighting a secret war, right under the noses of the occupiers.
And were they effective? Oh, absolutely. This quote says it all. The day after D-Day, Normandy was basically cut off. Why? Because the French resistance had cut the railway lines in over 500 places. 500. Think about that. German reinforcements couldn't get through. The resistance completely isolated the battlefield.
And the secret war wasn't just about blowing things up. It was also a war for hearts and minds. You know the famous V for Victory sign? It wasn't just some random symbol. It was actually created by a Belgian minister who had fled the country. It became this simple, silent act of defiance, a way to tell the occupiers every single day without saying a word, "We're still here, and you're gonna lose." All right, so we've got the beaches and the back alleys. Now let's look up. Section 3, the war from above. Because at the same time, a totally different, incredibly brutal war was being fought thousands of feet in the air. This was something called strategic bombing, and the main goal, on paper at least, wasn't just to destroy things. It was a cold, hard calculation. The idea was, if we bomb German factories and cities non-stop, they'll have to pull their resources, their planes, their anti-aircraft guns, even their troops, away from the front lines to defend their own country. But that strategic calculation had a horrific human cost. This number here, 50,000. That's how many civilians were killed in just one Allied firebombing raid on the city of Hamburg. One raid. It's just a brutal reminder of the reality of this air war.
But, and this is the crucial part, that brutal air campaign is what made D-Day possible. It absolutely crippled the German Air Force. By the time the invasion started, the Luftwaffe was a shell of its former self. You look at the numbers, the Allies had over 9,000 planes in the sky over Normandy. The Germans? Barely 800. That is total air supremacy, and it saved countless lives on the beaches below. Okay, our final section, the fight to the end. Let's bring this down to the ground level, to the front that every single soldier faced. The raw, terrifying personal reality of combat. And man, did that reality change depending on where you were. I mean, look at this. Even on D-Day itself, your chances of survival were wildly different depending on which patch of sand you landed on. At Omaha Beach, the U.S. forces walked into a meat grinder. They took about 2,000 casualties. That's basically double what the British and Canadians faced on their beaches, all because of high cliffs and dug-in German defenses.
And if you zoom out even further, the difference is night and day. Half a world away, in the Pacific, the fighting was just different. It was defined by an enemy that, for the most part, simply refused to surrender. They would fight to the very last man.
And nothing shows this better than these two numbers from the Battle of Tarawa. The Japanese had about 2,600 soldiers defending the island. You know how many survived to be taken prisoner? 17. Not 1,700, 17. That mindset, that absolute refusal to surrender, completely shaped how the war in the Pacific was fought.
So that brings us to the big question. How does seeing all these different fronts change how we look at World War II? Well, it shows us it wasn't just one story. It was a whole collection of them. You can't have the D-Day landings without the secret war in the back alleys. And you can't have that without the brutal war from above. It's all connected. It was a massive invasion, yes, but it was also a quiet act of defiance, a strategic calculation, and a million tiny, brutal fights to the death, all happening at once.